She got $180,000 for exceptional contributions. After less than one quarter, I'd just completed the shadow audit that saved the company from a 9-figure lawsuit. I didn't get angry. I opened a file. One file that, once activated, would freeze the entire payroll system like Minnesota water in winter. $19 million, suspended between the company's accounts and 8,000 employees' bank accounts. They wanted to play favorites fine, but they forgot who built the locks on their kingdom. My name is Jillian Beck, 38 years old, Director of Systems Administration and Internal Controls at Cardinal Metrics. For the past 11 years, I've been the one making sure our SaaS platform processed payroll for over 300 companies without a single federal compliance violation. Not one. 3 days ago, I'd just finished untangling a nightmare that would have cost us everything. Some junior developer had misconfigured our tax withholding calculations for multi-state employees. The IRS was already sniffing around. If they'd found it first, we'd be looking at penalties that would have gutted the company. I caught it, fixed it, documented everything, and filed the amended returns before anyone at the Treasury Department could blink. The all-hands meeting was at 2 p.m. sharp. Greg Langston, our CEO, stood at the podium with his $1,000 smile and his $2,000 suit, ready to announce the quarterly achievement awards. I sat in my usual spot, third row from the back, already mentally composing the email I'd send to my team about the IRS close call. Before we dive into our Q3 metrics, Greg began, his voice carrying that particular tone of false humility executives perfect after their third promotion. I want to recognize someone who's brought exceptional value to Cardinal Metrics. I straightened slightly, finally. Delaney Morrison, our new Chief Culture Officer, has transformed our workplace environment in just 5 weeks. Her innovative approaches to employee engagement have been nothing short of revolutionary. Delaney, of course. She glided to the stage in her designer heels, the ones that cost more than most employees' monthly rent, blonde, polished, with that specific brand of confidence that comes from never having to debug code at 3 a.m. or explain to federal auditors why your documentation is bulletproof. She'd appeared 5 weeks ago with a title no one had heard of before and an office next to Greg's. For her outstanding contributions, we're awarding Delaney a special recognition bonus of $180,000. The room went silent. Then the obligatory applause started, scattered and uncomfortable. I didn't join in. I was too busy doing the math. That was more than most directors' annual salaries, for 5 weeks of, organizing pizza Fridays and meditation sessions. I watched Greg's hand linger on the small of Delaney's back as she accepted the oversized check. The gesture was brief, professional to anyone not paying attention, but I'd been at Cardinal Metrics long enough to recognize the pattern. This wasn't Greg's first Chief Culture Officer. My phone buzzed, a Slack message from Tom in infrastructure. "You seeing this BS?" I didn't respond. I was already thinking 3 moves ahead. Back at my desk, I pulled up a file I'd created 4 years ago. Protocol B7, innocuous name, devastating function. It was my insurance policy, built into the architecture of our systems with full documentation and legal coverage. A dead man's switch, technically, or in this case, a dead woman's switch. You see, when you build the systems, you know where every door is, which keys open them, and more importantly, how to change the locks. And when your employment contract includes very specific clauses about system ownership and administrative privileges that HR never bothered to read carefully. Well, I minimized the file and went back to my regular work. Delaney's bonus would process through the same payroll system I'd built from scratch, the same system that required my authorization protocols at the federal level. She could have her $180,000, but she should have read the fine print about who really controls the kingdom's treasury. The changes started subtle, like termites eating through load-bearing walls. First email came Monday morning, 7:43 a.m. Effective immediately. D. Morrison has been added to the payroll authorization group. No discussion, no security clearance verification, no background check documentation, just Greg's digital signature and IT's immediate compliance. I pulled up Delaney's access logs. In 3 hours, she'd already browsed through salary data for half the engineering team. Curiosity or shopping for her next target, I documented everything. Screenshots timestamped and archived to my personal server. Old habit from my audit days. Always leave breadcrumbs. Wednesday's leadership meeting brought the real earthquake. As part of our cultural transformation, Greg announced, avoiding direct eye contact with me, the finance department will now operate under the guidance of our culture office. This integration will ensure our compensation strategies align with our values. Translation: Delaney wanted control of the money. CFO Margaret Chen looked like she'd swallowed glass. She'd been here 15 years, weathered 3 acquisitions, and never said an unnecessary word. Now she sat silent as Greg explained how a 5-week employee with no financial background would oversee her department. Questions, Greg asked, in that tone that meant, I dare you to have questions. I raised my hand. Will this restructuring affect system access protocols? Federal compliance requires. All technical concerns can be addressed offline, Delaney interrupted, her smile sharp enough to cut diamonds. We're focusing on culture, not bureaucracy. Bureaucracy, that's what she called the federal regulations that kept us out of prison. By Thursday, I'd been quietly removed from 3 critical email lists: the weekly financial audit reports, the system change notifications, the executive compliance updates, all stopped arriving. My admin privileges started disappearing like morning frost. Database access restricted, server permissions modified, security clearance under review. But Delaney had made a fundamental error, the kind only amateurs make. She thought the visible controls were the only controls. 4 years ago, when I'd architected our federal payroll integration, I'd built something else. Echo Loop, a monitoring system that sat completely outside our main infrastructure. It tracked every permission change, every unusual access pattern, every authorization that didn't follow proper channels. Technically, it was a security feature, the kind of thing that protects companies from insider threats. I'd presented it to the board myself. They'd approved it enthusiastically, especially the part about it being completely isolated from our primary systems. Unhackable, I'd called it. They loved that word. What I hadn't mentioned was that Echo Loop's alerts only went to one inbox, mine. Thursday night, 9:17 p.m., Echo Loop started screaming. Someone was creating new authorization pathways in our federal tax payment system. Someone was adding signing authority to accounts that controlled $19 million in monthly payroll disbursements. Someone who'd been on the job for 37 days. I sat in my home office, watching the alerts cascade across my screen, each one meticulously logged, backed up to 3 separate locations, including one very special server that existed entirely outside Cardinal's control. My employment contract sat in my desk drawer, marked with yellow highlighter on page 47. Section 12, Fund B. In the event of involuntary termination, all federal system authorizations must be properly transferred within 72 hours to prevent compliance violations. What it didn't specify was what happened if that transfer couldn't occur. If, for instance, the entire federal authorization structure had been built with fail-safes that only I understood. If the Treasury Department's integration required biometric confirmations that couldn't be spoofed or transferred. I picked up my personal laptop and started documenting every missing report, every revoked permission, every policy that suddenly changed when Delaney decided she wanted more power. The phrase constructive dismissal had such a lovely ring to it, especially when paired with federal compliance violation and willful negligence. My phone buzzed. Tom again. Heard you're training Delaney on payroll systems next week. I smiled for the first time since that all-hands meeting. Training, sure, let's call it that. Monday arrived wrapped in corporate speak and false enthusiasm. The email hit my inbox at 6:15 a.m., marked Urgent Transition Planning. Greg's assistant had scheduled a knowledge transfer session for 9 sharp. No consultation on my calendar. No request. Just an appointment blocked out for 4 hours with Delaney Morrison. As we optimize our organizational structure, the email read, we're ensuring seamless continuity in all critical functions. Please prepare comprehensive documentation for Ms. Morrison's review. Not thank you for 11 years, not we appreciate your contributions. Just prepare your documentation like a good little worker bee about to be replaced. I arrived at 8:55 to find Delaney already in the conference room, laptop open, wearing a blazer that probably cost more than our junior developers made in a month. She didn't look up when I entered. "Let's skip the pleasantries," she said, fingers dancing across her keyboard. "I need full system access, all passwords, and documentation for every process you currently manage." "Good morning to you too," I replied, setting down my coffee in a single folder. "Federal regulations require specific clearances before—" "Greg's already handled that." She slid a paper across the table. 1 page, 2 signatures, and apparently 11 years of security protocols meant nothing. "This isn't how federal compliance works," I said carefully. The Treasury Department requires someone with signing authority. That's me now." She finally looked up, and her smile reminded me of a barracuda. "Unless you have a problem with Greg's decision." I opened my folder and pulled out 140 pages of documentation. Every system, every process, every integration, all laid out in excruciating detail. She wanted comprehensive, I'd give her comprehensive. "Section 1 covers our basic payroll processing," I began. "Note that each step requires two-factor authentication linked to the Federal Employer Identification Number, which itself requires 3 hours later, Delaney's eyes had glazed over somewhere around page 60. She'd stopped taking notes after the third explanation of IRS Form 941 Quarterly Reconciliation Procedures. "This is unnecessarily complicated," she announced, closing her laptop with more force than necessary. "We're going to streamline all of this. Streamline federal tax compliance. Modernize it. I've already reached out to a consulting firm that specializes in payroll innovation. They'll have a new system up and running by next quarter." A consulting firm, of course. Let me guess, someone Greg golf with. "What about the current system?" I asked. "The one processing $19 million in monthly." "We'll keep running while we transition. You'll maintain it until the new system is ready." She gathered her things, clearly done pretending to care about actual knowledge transfer. "Oh, and I'll need you to disable those redundant monitoring systems you built. The consultants say they're slowing down processing." Redundant monitoring systems. She meant echo loop. "I'll need that request in writing," I said, "for compliance purposes." Her jaw tightened. "Fine, you'll have it by end of day." She swept out of the room, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume and the 140 pages she'd never read. I sat alone for a moment, then pulled out my phone and opened a very specific app, one that showed me exactly which redundant monitoring systems had flagged 17 unauthorized access attempts in the last 3 hours. All from Delaney's laptop, all trying to bypass the federal authentication protocols. That afternoon, her written request arrived. "Disable all secondary monitoring systems to improve system efficiency." I forwarded it to my personal email. Then I composed my reply. "Per your request, I'll need to document this change with our federal compliance officer. Please note that disabling these systems may trigger automatic alerts to the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. Standard protocol requires a 60-day review period for any changes affecting federal monetary transfers over $10 million monthly." Her response came within minutes. "Forget the request. Keep your little systems running." Little systems. If only she knew that my little systems had just documented her attempting to access federal tax payment protocols without proper authorization. Each attempt timestamped, geolocated, and backed up to servers that existed in a legal gray area she couldn't even spell. That night, I updated my resume, not because I planned to use it, but because it felt good to see it all written out. 11 years of keeping cardinal metrics compliant. 11 years of building bulletproof systems. And now, 6 weeks of watching an unqualified CEO's girlfriend try to dismantle it all for a consulting firm's kickback. She wanted to modernize fine, but she'd forgotten the first rule of system architecture: never tear down a wall until you understand what it's holding up. Thursday afternoon, 3:27 p.m. The death knock came via Outlook meeting invite. Confidential strategic personnel discussion, scheduled for 4 p.m. in the executive conference room. Required attendees: Greg Langston, Melinda Vance from HR, Delaney Morrison, and me. The kind of meeting where they offer you water and tissues. I spent the 33 minutes backing up every file, every email, every system log that mattered. Not to Cardinal servers. Those could be wiped the moment I walked out. Everything went to my contingency infrastructure. The one I'd built on personal time with personal resources. Completely legal. I'd had a lawyer verify that 4 years ago. The executive conference room smelled like leather and broken promises. Greg sat at the head of the table, avoiding eye contact. Melinda had her folder open, papers aligned with surgical precision. Delaney lounged in her chair like she'd already won something. "Jillian," Greg began, using his disappointment voice, "we appreciate everything you've done for Cardinal Metrics." Past tense, how thoughtful. However, Melinda picked up the script. "We're restructuring the technology department to better align with our evolving culture. Your position is being eliminated." "Eliminated," I repeated, tasting the word. "After 11 years. We're prepared to offer a generous severance package," Melinda continued, sliding papers across the table. 2 months' pay, continued health benefits through the quarter, and a glowing recommendation letter. I didn't touch the papers. In exchange for standard separation agreement, non-disclosure, non-compete, voluntary resignation effective immediately. Voluntary, there was that word again, dressed up like a choice. "And if I don't sign..." Greg finally looked at me. "Then we'll need to proceed with termination for cause. Delaney's identified several concerning patterns in your system management." Concerning patterns. I kept my voice level, professional, the same tone I used when explaining to auditors why their assumptions were wrong. Delaney leaned forward. "Unauthorized monitoring systems, excessive documentation retention, resistance to modernization initiatives." She smiled. "It paints a picture of someone who can't adapt to change." I smiled back. "Does your modernization initiative include understanding Section 12.b of my employment contract?" Melinda flipped through her folder, frowning. "What section?" "The one detailing federal system authorization transfers, the one your legal department signed off on 4 years ago." I stood up. "The one that activates specific protocols if I'm terminated without proper transition procedures." "That's not..." Melinda shuffled more papers. "I don't see any." "Page 47, paragraph 3. I gathered my things. "You have 72 hours from termination to complete federal authorization transfers. Given that Delaney lacks the required Treasury Department clearances, that could be challenging." Greg's face went pale. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you should have read the contract. All of it." I headed for the door. "I assume I'll receive the termination notice in writing for my records." "Now wait a minute." Greg stood up. "Let's discuss this reasonably." "We just did. You eliminated my position. I'm responding per contract terms." I paused at the door. "Oh, and Delaney. Those excessive documentation retention practices, they're required by federal law. Title 26, Section 6001 of the Internal Revenue Code. But I'm sure your consulting firm mentioned that." I left them scrambling for folders and phones. The security guard was already waiting at my desk with a cardboard box. Standard procedure. I packed under his watchful eye. Personal items only. No company property. No USB drives. No files. He didn't notice me palm the small key fob attached to my car keys. The one that looked like a gym membership tag, but actually held the encrypted access codes to Echo Loop's emergency protocols. "Ma'am." The guard looked uncomfortable. "I need your badge and company phone." I handed them over. Building access codes. Already deactivated. Of course they were. Delaney had probably submitted that request before the meeting even started. As I walked to my car, box in hand, I did the mental math. 72 hours from 4:47 p.m. on Thursday. That gave them until 7:47 p.m. on Sunday to figure out how to transfer federal authorities that required biometric confirmation, two-factor authentication, and Treasury Department verification. My phone, my personal phone, buzzed. "Heard you're leaving. WTF." I sat in my car, box in the passenger seat, and opened an app that looked like a meditation timer. 3 taps in a specific pattern, and Echo Loop's interface appeared. All systems nominal, all federal connections active, all authorizations still linked to my biometric data. I typed one command, initialize protocol B7, authorization section 12.b, timer 72 hours. The system responded, protocol activated, federal authorization transfer pending, automatic compliance protection engaged. In exactly 72 hours, if proper transfer procedures weren't followed, every federal payment authorization would lock, not deleted, not corrupted, just frozen in a compliance hold that only I could release. 19 million in monthly payroll, 8,000 employees, 300 client companies, all waiting for a signature that no longer worked in the building. Friday morning broke like glass against concrete. 8:07 a.m. My personal phone started buzzing. Unknown number, then another. By 8:15, I'd received 17 calls and 43 text messages. I turned off the phone and made coffee. The real show started on my laptop. I'd set up a dashboard to monitor Cardinal's system status. Completely legal, using only publicly available uptime data and federal compliance portals. By 9 a.m., the payment processing status had shifted from green to yellow. By 9:30, it was a beautiful shade of red. Tom broke protocol and messaged my personal email at 10:43. Payroll system is locked. Everything. Delaney's in Greg's office screaming, "What did you do?" I didn't respond. I didn't do anything. Section 12B did exactly what it was designed to do: protect federal compliance when authorization transfers weren't properly executed. At 11:15, Cardinal's main number called. I let it ring. At 12:37, Melinda from HR left a voicemail. "Jillian, we need you to assist with a technical issue. Please call back immediately." Technical issue, not "we made a mistake," not "please come back," just assist with their technical issue. I pulled up the federal compliance portal on my laptop. The public-facing dashboard showed Cardinal Metrics' payment status, authorization pending, primary signatory verification required. In smaller text below, automatic hold initiated due to compliance protocol, resolution requires verified signatory with active Treasury Department credentials. My neighbor knocked around 2 p.m. "Someone from your old job is at the door. Says it's urgent." I peeked through the blinds. Melinda stood on my porch, wringing her hands, phone pressed to her ear. I went back to my coffee. By 3 p.m., the first news alert popped up on my feed. Technical glitch delays payroll for thousands of workers. Cardinal wasn't named yet, but it would be. These things always leaked. At 4:22, Greg himself called. I answered on the third ring. "Jillian," his CEO voice had cracks in it. "We need to resolve this situation." "What situation?" I sipped my coffee. "I'm no longer an employee, remember. The payroll system is completely locked. $19 million in payments are frozen. Our banks can't process anything without federal authorization. Sounds like a job for your chief culture officer. I hear she's streamlining operations." Silence. Then, what do you want? "One, I'm enjoying my involuntary vacation, catching up on reading." Cut the crap. The CEO mask slipped completely. "You know what this is doing. Employees aren't getting paid. Direct deposits are failing." "Federal compliance is tricky," I agreed. "That's why I documented everything so carefully. Excessive documentation. I think Delaney called it, 'We'll rehire you. Full reinstatement. Just fix this.'" "Can't. I don't have building access anymore. Remember my credentials were revoked at 4:47 p.m. yesterday. It's all in the security logs." More silence. In the background, I could hear Delaney's voice, shrill and demanding. "Then tell us how to fix it," Greg said. "Fix what the system is working exactly as designed. Federal authorization can't transfer without proper verification. You have," I checked my watch, 27 hours and 12 minutes to complete the transfer process. "What transfer process?" Delaney has full administrative access. "To our internal systems, yes, but federal payment authorizations require Treasury Department verification, biometric confirmation, multi-factor authentication tied to the primary account holder's credentials." I paused. Did no one read Section 12B? Stop playing games. "I'm not playing anything. I'm unemployed. Remember eliminated? Restructured. Whatever word makes you feel better about it. The entire payroll is frozen." "No. The payroll is in compliance hold. Very different. One's a malfunction, the other's a safety feature." He took a breath. "What happens when the timer runs out?" "Timer? What timer?" I smiled at my reflection in the laptop screen. "Oh, you mean the 72-hour federal transfer window. Well, if proper authorization isn't restored, the system initiates a full audit lock. IRS, Department of Labor, Treasury, they all get automatic notifications of potential compliance violations. You're talking about destroying the company. I'm talking about federal law. The same law I spent 11 years keeping you compliant with. The same law Delaney thought was unnecessarily complicated. We'll sue you into the ground. For what? Following my employment contract, protecting federal compliance, ensuring proper authorization transfers. I laughed. Please do. I'd love to see that discovery process. The line went dead. By 6 p.m., 3 news outlets had picked up the story. Payroll crisis leaves thousands in limbo. Cardinal Metrics was named in 2 of them. Stock price had dropped 12% in after-hours trading. My phone rang again. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "You vindictive bitch," Delaney's voice, raw with fury. "Ms. Morrison, enjoying your new responsibilities. You know exactly what you did. This is sabotage. Corporate terrorism. This is Section 12.B of a legally binding contract, but please, tell me more about how feelings trump federal compliance." She hung up. I made another cup of coffee and watched the sun set over my garden. Somewhere across town, 8,000 employees were discovering their paychecks hadn't arrived. 300 companies were fielding calls about delayed payments, and one chief culture officer was learning that some systems can't be streamlined with a smile and a PowerPoint deck. The timer on my laptop showed 21 hours, 16 minutes. The federal government doesn't work weekends. Saturday morning, 9:18 a.m. Greg's call woke me from the first good sleep I'd had in months. "Name your price," he said without preamble. "Good morning to you too. Greg, how's the weekend treating you?" I have board members calling for my head. 3 major clients are threatening to pull contracts. The PR team quit at midnight. Name your price. I stretched, phone balanced on my shoulder. This isn't about money. Everything's about money. Your girlfriend got $180,000 for 5 weeks of culture building. How's that culture looking now? Silence. Then, what do you want me to say that I made a mistake? Fine, I made a mistake. Which one? Giving your girlfriend my bonus, letting her restructure a department she doesn't understand, or firing the person who knows where all the bodies are buried? All of it. Jesus, Jillian, all of it. Is that what you want to hear? I pulled up the compliance dashboard on my laptop. More red lights than a Christmas tree. What I want is irrelevant. You have 13 hours to complete a federal authorization transfer. The process is clearly documented in the transition materials I left. We can't access them. Delaney had it wipe your directories to make room for the new system architecture. I nearly laughed. She wiped the compliance documentation. She said it was redundant, that the consulting firm would provide updated versions. And where's this consulting firm now? They say they can't help until the current crisis is resolved. Of course they couldn't. Vultures prefer their meat already dead. Greg, I said, making my voice gentle, do you understand what happens in 13 hours? You tell me. Every federal agency we interact with gets an automatic alert. Compliance violation, potential fraud, unauthorized access to taxpayer identification systems, the kind of alerts that trigger immediate audits. We'll explain it was a technical error. Technical error. Your chief culture officer deliberately removed the only person authorized to handle federal payments, destroyed documentation, and attempted to bypass Treasury Department security. That's not a glitch. Greg, that's a pattern. His breathing got heavy. There has to be something you can do. I'm not an employee anymore. Remember, I can't access Cardinal systems. I can't enter the building. I can't even check my old email. I paused. But I do have an interesting document here. My original employment contract. We've been over this. Section 15.c. Did Melinda mention that one emergency reinstatement clause? In the event of critical system failure requiring specialized knowledge, the company can offer emergency contractor status at 5 times the standard rate. Silence. 5 times, I continued, plus immunity from any non-compete agreements, full restoration of access privileges, and written acknowledgement that the termination was improper. That's extortion. That's contract law. The same law you thought you understood when you let Delaney play with systems she couldn't spell. I need to discuss this with legal. You have 12 hours and 43 minutes. Oh, and Greg, the contract specifies it has to be signed by the CEO and board chair, not your girlfriend, not your golf buddy, the actual board chair. The board chair is in Tokyo. Then you better hope he's near a printer. I hung up and made breakfast. Real breakfast. Not the protein bar I'd usually eaten at my desk while running pre-market system checks. Eggs, bacon, toast, the works. At 11:56, Melinda emailed the emergency contractor agreement. I read every line twice. They'd tried to slip in a liability waiver on page 6. I sent it back with tracked changes. At 1:47 p.m., Greg called again. The board chair wants to speak with you. Put him on. Richard Nakamura's voice came through clear despite the distance. Ms. Beck, I'm reading some very interesting board meeting minutes from 4 years ago. It seems you presented something called echo loop.